"You are a careful man." Those were the words, spoken quietly in that particular tone a person uses when they're not insulting you. They're just telling you the truth about yourself. Careful men make the worst choices because they think so long about them. She said that to him in the lamplight of O'Lanson's Ford relay station, while a man named Groom was waiting in the next room and the wind was doing what Wyoming wind does in November. That moment was 20 hours into the worst day of Dex Harlo's recent career. But the day started on the Rimrock Road. Most bad days, if you trace them back far enough, started somewhere ordinary. 20 hours earlier, Dex Harlo was an ordinary man with ordinary troubles. 3 months left on a relay contract he didn't love, and a weather eye on the cloud bank building behind the Laramie Range. He had one passenger. That was unusual. Most runs through the Rimrock carried mail, freight, sometimes a pair of prospectors who couldn't afford to disagree with each other. One passenger, traveling alone, dressed like a woman of standing, with a single locked strongbox riding in the boot. That was unusual enough that Dex had asked the station master at Cheyenne about it, and the station master had told him to drive and not ask questions. He drove. He didn't ask questions. That was the contract. She sat in the coach with the stillness of someone who has learned that how you hold yourself in front of strangers tells them something. She wore a blanket of deep trade wool blue across her shoulders, 2 braids with quill work at the ties, and the particular expression of a person who is watching everything and revealing nothing. She hadn't offered her name. The manifest said, "Why strikes first." He didn't ask about the why. The Rimrock Road was 8 feet wide at its worst, and the outside edge had been freezing and thawing for 6 weeks. Dex knew this. He kept the team to the inside of every curve, held the brake light on the downgrade, read the road the way he'd been reading it for 2 years. He was reading it right up until the moment the right rear wheel found the section of shale that had calved off overnight. A 6-foot plate of it, gone, leaving nothing between the wheel and a 200-foot drop into Rawhide Creek. The coach listed. Not slowly. In one violent shudder, the whole right side dropped 8 inches and kept going. The horses screamed. The harness twisted. Dex had time for exactly one decision, and he made it in the part of his mind that didn't argue. His knife came out, the trace chains parted on the left side, and he was moving toward the door. The uphill door, the one that still had road under it. Before he'd finished the thought, she was already braced at the doorframe. He caught her arm, just the arm, high up near the shoulder, and pulled, hard. The coach went over behind them like something that had always meant to fall. The sound it made on the way down into the gorge was a long, grinding series of impacts that got quieter as the distance grew. Then the wind, then silence. They stood on what was left of the road. The horses were gone, loose, running back toward Cheyenne the way good horses do when the world ends. The strongbox was in the gorge. The mail was in the gorge. 3 months of Dex Harlo's unfinished contract was tumbling down Rawhide Creek.
The horses will stop at the next relay. They know the way.
He looked at her. She was checking her braids, which were intact, with the efficiency of someone who had mentally catalogued all the things that could go wrong before the first switchback. Her blanket was gone. It had gone over with the coach.
Nothing broken. 3 miles to the ford. We walk.
She wasn't asking. She was stating. And she was right. So they walked. She knew the road in the way that people know country they've passed through before, not as passengers, but as travelers who actually looked. She picked the inside of every curve without being told, knew where the ice would be on the north-facing stretches. Once put out her hand at a crosswind gap without a word, and Dex stopped, because stopping felt like the right answer to the gesture. And a gust came through the gap that would have taken him off his feet. He noted this, filed it under, "She knows this land better than he did." O'Lanson's Ford came into view at the top of the last rise, a low stone building with a cedar roof and a lamp in the window and smoke coming off the chimney straight up, which meant the wind had shifted. Calla Mossbrook would have the stove going, fresh team in the corral, and a roan horse tied at the post that Dex didn't recognize, with saddlebags that sat heavy and a military surplus blanket across the back that was new enough to still have its Army contract stamp. No. The man who came off the station porch to meet them was well dressed for the territory, which meant something in the territory. Good coat, clean boots, the kind of handshake that tells you the man has spent considerable time deciding exactly how firm to make it. Dex thought about that. The nearest settlement with a rider capable of reaching Grawl was Meridian Crossing, 15 miles east. Grawl would have had to hear about the crash, saddle up, and ride hard to be here already. The crash was less than 2 hours ago. He did the arithmetic. It didn't come out right. Calla Mossbrook met them at the door. Solid, practical, no nonsense, and took one look at Yatta and steered her inside without preamble. Dex got himself a cup of the coffee that had been on since morning and stood in the station's single main room, listening to the wind work at the window glass. Growl came in behind him and started talking about road maintenance records and the stage line's liability. The comfortable talk of a man who has already decided what the story is going to be. It was almost convincing. And then Dex went out to the relay barn to check on the fresh team. Routine, something to do while Grawl talked. And he found a man he didn't know going through what remained of Yatta Strikes First's salvaged travel kit. The strongbox was gone, but the kit had survived, strapped to the undercarriage, and this man had it open on the hay bales and was working through it with the focused patience of someone who knows exactly what he's looking for. Dex had seen that face before. Laramie. The outer offices of a land speculator named Fredwell, who'd gone bankrupt trying to file claims on Cheyenne River bottomland. This man had been one of Fretwell's hired researchers, the kind who researched through locked boxes. The man looked up, looked at Dex, put the kit down with care, the way someone does when they want you to think they were never touching it. He wasn't, and they both knew it. The explanation Growl gave was smooth. Road survey documents, he said. The stage line kept official route assessments and passenger manifests for insurance purposes. Vidic was simply confirming the contents matched the manifest before Growl filed his incident report. Dex listened to all of it and heard every part that was missing. Growl had an answer ready. Growl always had an answer ready. That's how you recognize the type. Yatta Strikes First sat at the station's main table with her hands wrapped around a cup of Calla Mossbrook's tea, and she watched the room the way a good scout watches a ridgeline. Not looking at one thing, but taking in the whole of it. She'd changed nothing about her expression when Grawl introduced himself. Nothing. Like a woman who'd expected exactly this name.
Enough. But I speak Crow enough. She wants to talk to someone she trusts, not to someone who's standing next to Mr. Grawl.
Calla Mossbrook had been at Olanson's Ford for 22 years and had opinions she expressed exactly once, in plain language, and then never repeated because she didn't feel the need. She set Dex at one end of the table, Grohl at the other, and put herself beside Yata and did the translating with the efficiency of a woman who had long since stopped being surprised by what men chose to do to each other. What came out in pieces was this. Haku Alala, the man Yata was traveling to marry, had borrowed against his family's future land use claims to pay a debt to Bertram Grohl's land assessment office. The debt was a construction of Grohl's making, a fee that had doubled and doubled again until it was unpayable except through the concession of a 10-year land use agreement covering the Eastern Crow hunting range. The range that sat directly over what Grohl had identified as a significant iron ore deposit.
The wedding joins my father's territory to the Ala Ala families. Together they refuse the concession. Separately, they cannot.
And the crash on the Rimrock Road was meant to delay her long enough that the wedding date would pass. Or worse. Grohl didn't deny it. He didn't have to. He hadn't said a word during the translation, just watched from across the table with the patience of a man who has already calculated 3 moves ahead. When Calla finished, he leaned forward slightly and he talked to Dex. Not to Yata, not to Calla, to Dex. A pause. The lamp guttered. Outside, a horse shifted in the corral. Then, he put a folded document on the table. Next to it, he put a number on a slip of paper. The number was 3 months' wages. Dex looked at it. He knew what Yata had told Calla. He knew what Growl's man had been looking for in the kit. He knew the arithmetic of the roan horse and the impossible arrival time didn't add up to coincidence. He knew all of it. And he picked up the pen anyway.
3 months. 3 months and I'm out of Wyoming.
He told himself he'd find a way to make it right later. He always told himself that. He signed the document. Growl folded it into his coat without ceremony, the gesture of a man retrieving something that was already his. And Yata Strikes First looked at Dex across the table with the expression of someone watching a confirmation, not a surprise. He couldn't hold that look. He went out to check the horses. The night came in fast, the way November nights do in the Laramie Range, all at once, without negotiation. Vidic settled himself in the relay barn. Grohl ate supper at the station table with the ease of a man in his own home. Calla Mossbrook moved between rooms with the targeted efficiency of a woman who disapproves of everything around her and has chosen to express it through motion rather than speech. And Yata sat with her tea and her stillness and did not look at the door. But she looked at the window, specifically at the ridge visible through the east-facing window. The ridge where, if you knew the terrain and had arranged a contingency, a man on horseback could shelter out of the wind and see the lamp in the station. Dex noticed this because he was watching her. He didn't know what it meant yet, but he was going to find out. He had signed the document. He had put Yata Strikes First in the hands of Bertram Grohl. That was the ledger. That was what he'd written. And somewhere out on that Wyoming ridge, a man who didn't yet know what the ledger said was making his way toward the light. Waka Strikes First came in through the barn, not the front. The front was Grohl's territory, lamp-lit and managed. The barn's rear door faced the corral fence and the creek beyond, and it didn't have a lamp, which meant it was dark and cold and unsuitable for men conducting business. Which is exactly why it suited a man who didn't want to be seen conducting business. He appeared in the barn doorway like he'd been there a moment ago. A tall man in a buckskin shirt with military brass buttons, his breath fogging in the cold, snow on the brim of his hat from whatever ridge he'd come down off of. He looked at Dex. He looked at Vidic, who was on his feet in the back corner near the locked storeroom. He looked at the locked storeroom door. Then he looked back at Dex. Three words. No raised voice, no drawn weapon. Just the particular weight that lands on a question when the person asking it already knows the answer is bad. Dex felt the full cost of the signed document in that moment. Not as an abstraction, but as a specific physical sensation, the way a man feels a bad weld give way under load. He'd put Yata in that locked room. Not Grohl, not Vidic. Dex Harlo had signed the paper that made that room possible.
You don't belong in here, friend. Turn around.
Waka didn't turn around. He kept his eyes on Dex. That was the thing. He wasn't addressing Vidic at all. He was addressing Dex. Because Dex was the one with something left to decide.
Everything is ready.
There are moments when a man's instincts and his choices are the same thing, and moments when they are not. The crash on the Rimrock Road had been an instinct moment. No thought, just action, trace knife and a grip on an arm. But every moment since had been a choice moment, and Dex had chosen badly, twice. He wasn't going to make it 3. He had 8 horses in the relay barn. 8 green-broke, wind-spooky, cold-season horses that hadn't been exercised in 2 days and didn't like strangers. He got between Vidic and the stall doors, and he pulled the pins on 4 of them. Fast, sequential, no hesitation. And those horses came out into the barn aisle like something released from a great deal of compressed waiting. The barn became noise and motion, and the particular chaos of large animals in confined space. Vidic went backward. Dex went for the storeroom. He didn't have a key, but the lock was a hardware store padlock on a hasp that had been screwed into pine planking. And pine planking loses arguments with a pry bar in under 4 seconds. Yata Strikes First came out of that room with the expression of someone who had been calculating the timing of her rescue and found it approximately correct. The horses had found the back door. Now there were 8 unsupervised horses in the station yard making the kind of noise that woke Callum Mossbrook and made Grohl come off the porch with his hand on his coat and his certainty disrupted. Which was the point? Waka had his sister's arm and was already moving toward the 2 horses he'd left tied to the corral fence. Tied loose, ready, because he'd planned this from the ridge. Vidic came through the barn in pursuit, but the loose horses were between him and the fence, and horses don't move for men they don't know, especially in the dark, especially when they're already agitated. He fired twice. Both shots went wide, not because he was a poor shot, but because a 1,200-pound animal moved between him and his aim at exactly the right moment. The way animals do when the world hasn't consulted them. Grohl stood in the station yard and watched his calculation dissolve. He was a patient man and a careful man, and he'd spent 2 days constructing a situation that had just collapsed in the time it takes 8 frightened horses to decide the corral is preferable to the barn aisle. He looked at Dex.
Dex looked at him. The document was in Grawl's pocket. It said what it said.
Growl was a man who knew when a scene was too public to contain. He walked to his roan horse, mounted, and rode east toward Meridian Crossing without a word. Vidic, after a moment's calculation, followed. The station yard got quiet. Just the wind. Just Calla Mossbrook standing in the doorway with a lantern, looking at Dex the way she'd been looking at him all day. Without surprise, without condemnation, with the specific patience of a woman who has watched men make choices for 22 years and knows that eventually the choices catch up. Yata Strikes First stopped her horse at the gate. Her brother was already on the road. The encampment was 2 miles east. The wedding date was 3 days away. She turned in the saddle and looked at Dex, standing in the station yard, with the horses finally settling around him and the cold coming in off the ridge. She didn't say anything. She had already said the only thing that mattered. 20 hours ago, in the lamplight, before she said it. She'd been right. She'd known she was right. And she'd come anyway, because duty demanded it. And she was a woman who understood duty differently than Dex did. Not as a weight imposed, but as a thing she'd chosen, deliberately, with open eyes. She turned her horse and rode east. The sound of hooves on the frozen ground lasted a little while. Then, just wind. Dex Harlo lit a cigarette in the station yard and stood with it while the horses sorted themselves out, and Calla Mossbrook went back inside to manage whatever Calla Mossbrook managed at the end of days like this. The signed document was in Grawl's pocket, and he didn't know what Grawl would do with it. File it? Burn it? Use it? He was still 3 months from the end of his contract, still planning on Colorado, still good at finding the version of events that asked the least of him. He'd gotten Yata out. That was real. He'd also put her in. That was real too. Both things were true, and neither one canceled the other out. And Wyoming wasn't the kind of country that told you which one to remember. A careful man, making the worst choices, because he thought so long about them. He finished the cigarette, went inside. 3 months.
The lamp is warm and steady, Dex.
3 months. The accounting's done.